Hello and welcome to Secure the Continent with me, Benga Aboroa. This is the program where we bring you all the latest analysis on security situations on the continent. But before we start with today's show, let me bring you the latest security headlines. ECOWAS blames foreign interest for rising coups. Gunmen attack tomato processing plant in Nigeria and kill 4 policemen. Senegal begins military operations against Casaman's secessionists. And Chad surrenders Central Africa former head of the anti-Balaka militia, Eli Mokam, to the International Criminal Court. Stay with Secure the Continent. I will be right back. On Secure the Continent today, we are focusing our attention on the proliferation of arms and weapons across Africa. These small arms and light weapons are in a real sense weapons of mass destruction, easy to use, conceal and maintain, but they are the primary tools of violence in almost every conflict where the innocent suffers the most. We have more for you in this package report.
Small arms and light weapons cause massive devastation across Africa. Security aspects have linked many local conflicts and security challenges to the proliferation of these weapons. There are more than 600 million small arms and light weapons in the world, and 100 million of these are believed to be spread across Africa. 30% of African small arms and light weapons are found in sub-Saharan Africa, where they fuel insecurity, terrorism, and insurgencies. From across the Sahel to every other part of Africa, there's an urgent need to address the heavy presence of arms, identify the sources, and find solutions to the problems. The majority of these arms come from the diversion of mismanaged stockpiles by nations, making it available on the black market, and from arms dealers. Understanding the root of this challenge is key to solving the problem.
Now, joining me on Secure the Continent today to discuss the proliferation of small, light and arms weapons on the continent of Africa is Dennis Makri. He is the former director of Department of Security Services, DSS, and a security consultant in Nigeria. Also, I have Brian Adera, a former Kenyan Special Forces officer and international security consultant in Kenya. And pretty much later, I will be joined by Dr. Adeoye Akinola, who is a conflict expert. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to you both and welcome to Secure the Continent.
Thanks, Mr. Benga.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Now, I'd like to start with Brian. Brian, what are small and light weapons?
Thanks a lot. Nice to see you once again, Mr. Benga, and thanks for hosting me. Not new on this platform. I've been here before, and a while back, I was invited to speak to the narrative and, of course, the developments within the country, Kenya, where I've been brought up and grown, and honored to have served among the men, in the special forces, which was the pioneer for this country way back in 2007. And I'm happy to be hosted here to speak to this, all very important issue that is, of course, ravaging most, if not all, African countries. So small arms and light weapons, as it said, are pretty much arms that are pretty much able to get into people's hands and utilized in a manner that is obviously also very, very easy. And that manner we are talking about arms that are pretty much, you're able to lay your hands on, conceal, use, purchased for that matter, and in some cases also improvised. So, you're talking from ranging from pistols to small, weapon systems, rifles or machine guns for that matter, that individuals are able to lay their hands on. And in most cases, and that's the reason as to why we're actually here to speak to this issue, is that the whole sum total of that possibility of individuals, and in this case, people who are not supposed to have their hands on those weapon systems, have them and use them for motives other than the well-intentioned motives for people who should be having guns in their hands. And so the proliferation of small arms and light weapons.
Thank you, Brian. Now, Dennis, the wave of arms proliferation across the continent has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. What factors are responsible for this continued proliferation?
Thank you very much for today. We looked at this situation and you find out that the consequences of not controlling arms, have overwhelmed even countries whereby non-state actors having these arms and then, of course, using them illegally. And a lot of people die, because of that. And then, of course, a lot more are displaced. So you have all the IDPs, people who are in refugee camps in their country or outside their countries. In Nigeria alone, we have about more than 3 million IDPs, people that have been displaced. So these are the consequences of having small arms available in non-state actors, in the arms of non-state actors.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Now, back to you, Brian. Current figures indicate that 640 million small arms and light weapons circulated globally, and an estimated 100 million are located in Africa, 30 million of which are in sub-Saharan Africa. Former Nigerian President General Abdulsalami Abubakar stated in a recent speech that Nigeria has over 6 million small arms in circulation, backed by 2020 SBM intelligence report. What is attracting all the small arms to Africa and West Africa, which sees quite a lot of them?
See what, Mr. Benga, the statistics you just read right there, 600 million globally, 100 million in Africa, continental Africa alone, and we are talking about 30% of that being in the sub-Saharan Africa. It's shocking if Nigeria alone has 3 million, small arms and light weapons in the hands of the non-state actors, or the wrong guys for that matter. Our country, Kenya, by going by the Geneva paper, and I talked about this when we launched, a gun production factory just last year. The Geneva paper of 2018 did put the statistics at, over 650,000 small arms and light weapons within the borders of my country, Kenya. And that is not something that, should make us happy. If you compare, of course, with the other countries, we are, badly off. Because ideally, every weapon system in the wrong hands is something that spells danger, ranging from, ravages on lives and livelihoods all the way up to death, as it's been said by my good, panelist right here. But of course, we realize there's a need. There's a need that's been created, and of course that's pursued by people who are driven by wrong motives. But of course, if you're on a hindsight, you're looking at Africa, continental Africa itself. There's not so much hope and confidence in the way we are handling the main issue here of proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And it's ranging from the effects of bad governance, for that matter, that have created an environment in which, there's contestations between, factions. And of course, there's ungovernable spaces or ungoverned spaces. Nearly all nations in Africa, to be honest, if you were to shake a stick at one or two, there's just quite a few that you can pretty much say don't have spaces within those nation states that are ungovernable, or there's no presence of, government having its power, existing those spaces. And that in itself is a vulnerability thereof. And of course, when we are looking at nation states that comprise the continental Africa, we are borders. But of course, you realize that this threat in itself is transnational. It disobeys the borders that the nation states actually optimistically have themselves around,
Yes.
and of course, shepherd in terms of governance issues. The effect of proliferation of small arms and light weapons is pretty much like a transnational threat, and it has to be looked at realistically from that perspective by different governments and other organizations that, under which nation states actually coalesce, be it ECOWAS here, be it the East African community there, be it the West African blocs, and that is the failure in terms of even at a macro level where we are failing. But we are actually looking at the ravages of these, state actions that pretty much spell danger and or improvisation on one end. And the research findings actually talk to us about the needs, and the needs can be boiled down to the individual needs. And when you have individuals thinking, hey, I don't see the effect and of course the benefit of government with me, you have people starting to coalesce around wrong narratives. And if those wrong narratives are profiteering and they need to actually pick up arms to advance the same, then you start to see this kind of clan conflicts that can be molded around some agenda, and you start to see some factions actually developing. And guns are cheap to access, and that's another problem right there. So the nation states have got to actually look beyond the borders in which they actually,
It has to be a concerted effort of different countries.
It has to be concerted efforts that the nation states are going to pursue very vigorously without suspicion, between each other. And of course, I know, for instance, there's the arms race, which of course is another subject to discuss, those kind of tables.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I would like to bring in Dennis here. Dennis, you were former director of Nigeria's Secret Service, the Department of State Services, and you will be, I'm sure you have first-hand knowledge of the effects of this proliferation on small and light weapons on peace and security in Africa. What are some of the implications of having countries awash with these small and light weapons?
Well, you know that there had not been any concerted efforts among countries in controlling small arms and light weapons. I know that ECOWAS had been attempting to, control it, but you see, you cannot control things like this without solving the root causes of why small arms and light weapons are proliferating. Because look at West Africa, for instance. We have most of the coups that have happened in the country were basically by the military. And of course, people were agitated because of poverty, hunger, unemployment, and stuff like that. When the military does not go into coups, then of course you have other groups of people that are agitating for either self-determination, for economic resource controls, and all kinds of things whereby they feel that, well, if the government is not going to do something for them, they are going to actually take the law into their hands and then go ahead and get it. And when they do that, you find out that they source for weapons. And then, of course, just like Brian has said, it's easy to source for weapons, although they are becoming very expensive. And then, of course, you have to also look at situations where these proliferations are being not just by any person going to the market and picking up one, because they are very expensive. AK-47 is about 500,000 naira. And when you think of 500,000 naira, maybe you're thinking of some 100 or 150,000, 1,000 or $150,000. $1,000 or something like that. So you find out that these things are very expensive. And because they're expensive, you start to wonder whether those people that are carrying these arms are the same people that are buying them. That means there are people behind it, people are supporting them, and of course, for a different agenda from the government.
So
we
what
start
do
to look
these,
at-
what are the effects? What do these, what kind of danger do these small and light weapons, unregulated, present to populations? Hello, Dennis, are you there? I believe we have some technical issues with Dennis. Now, I'd like to come to you, Brian. Still talking about small arms and light weapons and its proliferation. Now, let's talk about, Brian, let's talk about those who produce these weapons. The people meant to bring about peace to the world are also the ones selling death machines. What do you make of the fact that 5 of the permanent members of the Security Council are responsible for about 70% of the global arms trade? That's somewhat perverse and worrying, isn't it? Do you agree with that?
I lost you right there. I don't know if that's my question or...
It's for you, Brian. I'll get back to Dennis after this. Yeah, Brian, my question is, the people meant to bring peace to the world are also the ones selling death machines. What do you make of the fact that 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council are responsible for about 70% of the global arms trade? That's somewhat worrying.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, you cannot have a hyena around the table when you're discussing, issues about, meat in the jungle. And so that right there is a conflict. And you have the arms dealers and the nations, as you just mentioned, that are pretty much at the center of the arms sales across the globe, are pretty much happy. You know, the global economics are defined by extension of that economic element of national power, or with respect to those nations' approaches and their foreign policies, for that matter. And the problem that they dump elsewhere is, in some cases, or in most cases, I've got to be honest with you, none of their problems. I mean, the end user can as well, go to the doldrums in terms of what conflicts are playing out in Africa. And we've seen the UN. I mean, the problem that's happening in the Sahel region, we just did see the UN coming up just later on in time to pretty much, show its face. And that's the problem that we have with regards to the lack of representation, or really so much of a joke in terms of representation of Africa at the universe of the globe. And so the problem of proliferation of small arms is not going to be an interest to them, as long as this money that's rolling into the bank or into their pockets, the big players are not going to be as worried, unless, of course, it's something that's going to be directly affecting their interest. And something like that is going to be something that's far much, large in scale, in terms of what's going to be shaking them the wrong way. And so Africa's got to fix its own problems by itself. And largely, it's questions of leadership at the top. Governance is a big problem if you ever look at the way African countries have had to run the affairs of their own nations. And it's their own undoing. In most cases, we talk about coups, and coups ensure that the people that actually come to power that by those means that are in themselves a legitimate arms, contestations that are, armed in nature. And so they're not going to be the people that are going to be accountable, at the end of the day, as to what weapon systems are actually in the hands of the right people, and or if the wrong people themselves are prop them up in positions of power, and they don't find their way in the runnings of the affairs of the government. These people are not going to be accounted for. And so coups and counter coups have happened in several nation states in Africa, without mentioning names. And that's right there is a problem. And they say at the global arena that, in this day and age, no problem and no, mistake that you make is personal and private anymore. They are both very public, in the way they play out. And the ramifications are also just as public. Terrorism in one place or conflict in one place is going to be. And if you were to draw a map, Mr. Benga, with a pencil about the proliferation of small arms being a problem of of security and safety in the continent of Africa, then you realize that you pretty much come up with a map that is borderless, as I said, because it's a transnational threat.
Exactly.
And,
and you also recall in the aftermath of the NATO invasion in Libya, for the ouster of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, its effect was that a lot of the Sahel region in Nigeria were awash with small and light weapons.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm speaking to. And that's the narrative right there, that post-war periods ensure that there's so many of weapon systems in their own hands, and people are watching this space. Trust me, if you have to have a look at any educational catalog that a terrorist of half a world away is using, you'll realize that it could look very, irrational to you, but it makes absolute sense to a terrorist elsewhere, another half a world away. And they compare, not just like you and I, the good people will be comparing notes about issues of good governance and being good citizens within countries, of being global citizens who are good people. And so the reality on the ground is that leaders and, of course, those blocks that we have African countries coalesce under have not wrapped their minds around the realistic outplay of things and lockstep with the transnational threats that we are combating in terms of just, if you ever look at the narrow compass of proliferation of small arms, and it spells grave danger to African countries in their totality. You cannot sit in Nigeria and be happy that, oh, I had these guns, I've had this someone. Like today, some people actually shot when they're traveling down a road from a place called Turkana to Kitale. And it's bandits who have guns in their hands. And I saw a picture going viral of a member of possibly another country altogether, who's an expatriate in this country. And right there, you could be having some diplomatic tiff as to how we are not actually protecting the interest of those that individual who comes from a world to do business in this country. And so we have to realize that transnational threats have got to be given the benefit of seriousness with which we have to coordinate affairs of running our systems as a continent, if not as a globe.
Okay, Brian. Let me bring back Dennis into the conversation. Now, Dennis, there's a saying that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Are these arms bad in itself? Because campaigners against arms sales say arms sales don't enhance security. They fuel conflict and repression and make the world a more dangerous place. Are they right?
Yes, of course. Yes, the argument has always been there. For people, when countries are fighting and they have insurgency, for instance, you find out that the government of the day will say that the insurgents are carrying illegal arms and they are rebels, they are insurgents.
Yes.
Of course. And then the insurgents will tell you, or the militias will tell you, that they are freedom fighters or human rights agitators. So this goes back and forth. But all the same, you find out that when all these things are happening, governments themselves, especially when it comes to coups, if in Africa, for instance, if you carry out an unsuccessful coup, you will be arrested and then, of course,
treasonous,
prosecuted and killed. Yeah, of course. If you win, if it was successful, then you now run the government. And of course, you legitimize yourself by doing that. And we've seen that happen in so many different countries, But the basic thing here is good governance. If we want to stop the proliferation of these small arms and light weapons, African leaders have to come up with a situation where they offer good governance to their people. Because as long as there is no good governance, we saw it happening in Mali. You find out that the people will agitate, and then at the end of the day, the military comes in there and then, of course, join the people and take over the government. And it spreads. If you look at the trending from the 1960s,
there's a contagion effect.
It starts from Mali all the way to Guinea, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Nigeria, Congo, Cameroon, and that trend was cut off when we start having democratic governments. But now that trend has started again. It has started again with Mali, Burkina Faso. You see, the United African Union will say, condemn it and say coups are not wanted.
Yes.
But what happens? Can they really effect it? These countries will go on. The military governments will continue, because they feel that they are doing what the populace want. Like one of Nigeria's head of state says, if there is a successful coup, know that people in the populace also support it, because
Yes.
they will come out dancing. And that is because there is no good governance. So that's where we find ourselves. And the governments of the region, or in fact in Africa as a whole, have to look at itself back again and see what they can do in offering good governance, because without that, we're going nowhere.
It's the benchmark for everything. Thank you very much. Dennis, it's still good governance. Once the good governance is there, those conditions for illicit arms and armed struggles will be reduced to the barest minimum. Now, talking about what countries and governments are doing to stop this proliferation in small lighter weapons, Brian, the African Union has showed a renewed urgency in addressing illicit arms flows, especially through its master roadmap to silencing the guns, which gives clear directives and timelines to member states to implement these objectives. How has that fared so far? And what are some of the roadblocks to preventing the silencing the guns master plan from being more effective?
Fine. As it's been said by my good panelist friend, a few minutes ago, the AU has not shown that it has teeth to bite and fangs to sting. I was here on this platform when we talked about the AU pussyfooting around the issues that they need to actually pronounce themselves very strongly on. And this goes a long way to embolden, nation states to pretty much go on with their businesses as usual. So it's business as usual. Much as we're talking about the responsibility of the AU and the way it has mismanaged, on the altar of its mandate to control and to rein in errant nations. We just spoke to the narrative about coups and counter coups. And, a faction that comes out strongly and of course, overthrows the government finds legitimacy from its people, one. And then two, the AU gets to accept, in quotes, that they actually do run their business as usual. So that is one roadblock right there. But then the other is that I feel the AU doesn't have the relevant capacity. And so capacity needs to be built, with regards to the way the AU is actually composed and resourced, for that matter, to be able to actually have its foot really strongly, gripping the continent and having the issues that they're mandated to actually, spell and throw themselves around, being effectively felt and done. If that is not done, then, countries are left to their own schemes. And we've seen this in the Sahel region. We've seen the level of lack of control with, with regards to other nations. We just had the conflict between Ethiopia, and the armed conflict that's been going on in Ethiopia for quite a long time before the AU actually did come out strongly to actually say something that's meaningful. So there's quite a lot to actually shake a stick at. But over and above that, the responsibility of nation states cannot be, dismissed. And that's why I think pretty much, and I'm pretty certain about this, that pretty much governance is an issue of nation states that are, painstakingly gained independence for self-governance. And so the responsibility is hugely on the shoulders of the governments that be to actually contain issues that are relevant to affect the lives and livelihoods of the people that they're actually leading. And with that relevance, I'm talking about, the fair, way of distribution of the national cake, because it actually starts from there. We've spoken to the issues around resource distribution, because a need for someone like myself to actually want to pick up arms means that I'm feeling there's something that the void that needs to be filled. A bandit half a world away in some space within a nation in Africa is not going to be aware of what AU is going to do if the nation goes south. they are pretty much, combating what they actually really need to address to pretty much survive by themselves. And so that's the issues, the root causes that we really need to actually talk about here. Otherwise, all these organizations may be as well be irrelevant, because if you are looking at the ravages of proliferation of small arms or other issues that are affecting African states, we've got to actually shine a strong light at macro issues and the way they're playing out at the bottom, and probably maybe making room for the bad things to actually sprout up, flourish, and start to have bad narratives gelling people together, where we now have issues of transnational crimes ravaging countries in Africa, issues of proliferation of small arms and light weapons, issues of terrorism, that we have other foreign terrorist organizations like ISIL pretty much having a foothold in Africa. This is something that was never seen before. So we got to ask ourselves questions as to why we have these vulnerabilities that are created by nation states. So irrespective of whether they gel together and they have a big boy or big man looking on top of them, the responsibility has got to be on the shoulders of governments who have to responsibly think about their roles and how their governance or lack of the same get to affect the people that they are actually leading.
Thank you, Brian. And now, before I let you go, Dennis, Brian just spoke about the African Union and what they're doing to stop the proliferation of arms and the responsibility of nation states. Now, let's zoom out and look at this problem from a global scale and what the entire world is trying to do about it. The United Nations Arms Treaty has been enforced for some years now, yet many signatory states continue to sell arms to governments that have been accused of committing human rights abuses. One big example that stands out is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Why is the treaty not working?
Well, you see, it also boils down to the inability of these global bodies to control, members who are erring. For instance, the Armed Trade Treaty, which is supposed to be signed by all nations, you find out that even signatories to it, some countries have refused to sign, and some countries that have signed go ahead to do what they want to do. Most of the arms coming into Africa are coming from China, Russia, Ukraine, Germany. Now, who controls them? Who police the policeman? You see what is going on in Ukraine right now, and what is the United Nations going to do? Even NATO is caught in a bind on what exactly they want to do. And then, of course, when it goes back to United Nations, it's a big problem. So is somebody going to veto? Is somebody feeling that they are too strong? And of course, when the big boys are the ones that are interested or who are selling these arms, it means an economic gain for them. So as far as they are concerned, it doesn't mean anything to them. They will continue to sell these arms, to Africa. And then, of course, in East Africa or South Africa and West Africa, of course, because they will sell to the Mediterranean countries, and the Mediterranean countries will sell it all the way down to the Sahel region, and it proliferates right in the region. So I don't think the big unions, global unions, have anything to do. I don't think they can really.
These treaties are probably not. They're just treaties on paper, and I guess it depends on who is committing on paper. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dennis. We'd like to go on a quick break now, and when we come back, we'll be preparing solutions. I'd like to say a very big thank you to Brian Adera, former Kenya's Special Forces Officer and international security consultant, for your insights. And when we come back on the second half, Dennis Amakri will still be here, and we'll be joined by Dr. Adeoye Akinola, who is a conflict expert. Do stay with us and secure the continent. We'll be right back. If you're just joining us and Secure the Continent today, we have been discussing the proliferation of arms which has, across the region, directly resulted in conflicts, transnational criminal violence, non-state terrorist campaigns, and various humanitarian violations, including rape, torture, and kidnapping. Now, joining us in the second half is Adeoye Akinola, a conflict expert and head of research and teaching at the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. Welcome to the program, Adeola.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on the program.
Okay, Adeola, in the first half, just before we went on the break, I was discussing with Dennis Amakri. My question to him was, you know, a lot of countries signed these treaties, these treaties that prevent proliferation of small arms, but they're not enforced, and they still sell weapons to countries that are negligent when it comes to human rights. Now, the United States, China, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom, all permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, sell more than 70% of all weapons in the world, and they are members of the United Nations Security Council, which is the body charged with maintaining international peace and security. So my question to you is, with thousands killed every day, is it possible for governments to control powerful companies that dominate the global weapons market?
That's an interesting question, and it's one of the issues that have confronted policymakers across the globe, particularly from conflict zones like Africa, and even when you look at the Sahel, for instance, which now has one of the highest rates of conflict in the world. It is extremely, I want to stress the fact to say it is extremely almost impossible for countries, especially the weaker countries, to stop this powerful MNC from manufacturing weapons. If you recall, in 2015, there was a UN resolution, Small Arms Resolution 2220, that tried to actually debate on this. And it was particularly interesting because out of the 15 members of the UN Security Council, 9 voted in support of the continuation of countries to sell arms, while only 6 abstained. I think all the 3 African countries, Angola, Chad, and Nigeria, abstained from voting, but China, Russia, and Venezuela also abstained from voting, but the all other countries voted in support. Those countries are powerful, and they made a lot of money from manufacturing weapons. I don't see them giving that up easily.
Okay, thank you, Adeola. Now, Dennis, the illicit arms market involves various actors, from the manufacturer to the end user. And we do understand, a lot of countries in Africa do not allow citizens to carry weapons or own weapons, unlike what is obtained in the United States. So where are these weapons coming from, and what can be done to disrupt this illicit brokers along the supply chain?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. You find out that, like your charts showed, most of the weapons, especially the ones coming to Africa, are mainly from Russia, the Ukraine, Germany, and France. And then, of course, their major trade partners are the Mediterranean countries of Morocco, Algeria, Libya, even Egypt. And then from there, of course, we know what happened in Libya when Gaddafi was overthrown. And then, of course, it now comes all the way down into the Sahel to all the West African countries. Now, that is one side of it. We also have the other arms coming in from the sea, like importations from Turkey. You know, I personally remember a situation where a lot of arms were imported to Lagos from Turkey, and then, of course, they were all documented in the country. Now, remember that for one seizure that was captured, I can assure you that 2 or 3 other batches have gone in. without being caught. So the proliferation is very, very high. And they are in there, and they are not being documented, because even the ones that have been addressed, that have been captured by government, sometimes in the stockpiles are being sold out. We've had armed robbers confessing that they have bought arms and ammunition from security agencies. So these are illegally, of course. These are the situations that we find ourselves.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis. Now, back to you, Adiola. Just to buttress what Dennis said now, Nigerian soldiers were arrested in February 2016 for illegally selling arms to Boko Haram members, while Ethiopian and Ugandan soldiers serving with the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, were accused of selling weapons from their stockpiles to traders in Somalia's illicit arms market. What is responsible for arms diversion from state stockpiles to those by those saddled with the responsibility to protect them? Why do we hear this sort of things?
Thank you so much. Let me recall an incident in Mozambique during the UN-led DDD, Disarmament, Demobilization, and Reintegration. During the disarmament exercise, what we realized was that instead of the facilitator of the exercise to find a way to destroy the arms that were being collected from ex-combatants, what happened was that they were putting it in the storage facilities. And before you know it, those weapons, more than about 190,000, find their way back on the street. So most of the time, the question is not just about the military personnel selling, it is about the leaders themselves. If in case, let's look at Nigeria, for example, and let's say there's an amnesty declared in northern Nigeria and Boko Haram members are submitting their arms and ammunition. The expectation is just that those arms and ammunition will be destroyed. But when there's no accountability and there's a bad policy whereby you are putting them in a storage that the government cannot even control, so those arms are being retrieved from the storage and being sold to the people. You also need to think about the economic uncertainties across Africa, particularly even in Nigeria and the Sahel countries, where the military, most of the military personnel are being paid poorly. We know that the people at the higher level are being compensated, they are being paid, but the people at the lower level are not being paid expectedly. So they deal in arms selling so that they can also make some living out of it.
Quite a complex situation there, Adiola. But before I go to Dennis, what is the global best practice in mopping up, the small arms from circulation? We did, while you were talking, a video was playing in the background showing these weapons destroyed. And you mentioned the incident in Mozambique where this arms that were mopped up were kept in storage, but they found their way back into circulation. Is it advisable to destroy, because these weapons are expensive and they could be given to security agencies to help in performing the duties? What's the recommended practice?
This is a complex situation, and people address it from different perspectives and standpoints. There are many people that believe that if there are no weapons, or if there are no transfer of weapons, there will have been less crime, on the streets. The more weapons we have, the more, particularly the small arms which people can easily carry, the less of it we have, the better, or the more sane the world will be. And the debate has also been ongoing in the United States, where people are advocating for the government to ban the easy access, to small arms. So for me, it is so difficult for the government, because we also know that the state security agency would need to also use these weapons, and you can never tell. Many of them are not too trustworthy. They rent it out. Some they sell, some they recover. I also remember a case in Somalia when I was in Mogadishu. The United States allegedly got an intelligence report against some Al-Shabaab group. They move in and not arrest them, they shoot at them, kill. And what did they do with the loads of weapons they had? They left the weapons and they walked away. And we had about 2 trucks of weapons left for anyone, any interested party to pick on the street. So sometimes even the security agency has to be mindful of how they manage guns or small weapons that are recovered. But I tell you, the companies manufacturing those weapons will not easily let go because, like I said, they are making a lot of money out of it. And 80% of the casualties are usually women and children, which is extremely unfortunate.
Quite unfortunate indeed, Adeoye. I would like Dennis to respond to the same question. As a former director at the Department of State Security, would you advise these weapons that are mopped up to go back into circulation, or should they be destroyed? We have plenty paramilitary and security agencies that could use some of those weapons, and they're not particularly cheap.
Yes, I think I'm for destroying those weapons. Destroying those weapons. Because when you look at those weapons, some of them are not very modern, although they are, light weapons that have been old, and you see kashabulas and all kinds of weapons. Well, the AK-47s, I think, can be processed properly. And then because they are still in use by many security forces, and they are very expensive. Like I said earlier, 400 to 500,000 naira, for one. So those can be processed and then, of course, reissued. But again, the major problem with that is, how do we record them? The data of keeping them is not very proper. There's no painstaking digital recording of these very weapons. And that's why they disappear. Even the Inspector General of Police of Nigeria the other day got a report from a committee that is set out to look at all the armories, and then they discovered that thousands and thousands of weapons are missing from those armories. So how do you go about recording, documenting them so that they don't disappear? And then it is very, very possible, like the other commentator has said here, that those people that are in charge of armories will usually, they don't have enough money. Either they are renting them to armed robbers, or they are selling them outrightly to make money for themselves. So this is a problem right there. And remember, we are talking of small arms and light weapons. There is also the importation of explosives, which are basically used by the oil and gas industry. And these ones are also, they are either used for blasting or in the mining industries, or for in the drilling industry. So all these are also to be documented properly and known who is importing them, how they are being stored, how are they being transported across the country. Because if we don't, I remember in the Niger Delta, when we were having the Niger Delta issues, some of these explosives were missing. And they were missing, and then before you know it, they've used it to blow up a pipeline. So these are all areas that are not being attended to properly. And I will urge the security agencies to start looking at that area whereby they could control it. You want to either ask people to return their arms for money, or you want to seize it, and then, of course, whichever one that you have in your domain should be destroyed.
Yes.
Should be destroyed, because we know the proliferation is being sourced by these arms that are either captured or are in storage.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dennis. Now, Adeoye, quickly, just before we wrap things up, what would be your solution to curtailing the problem of small and light weapons on the continent? What quick fixes are needed, what do we need to do? In 30 seconds, if you may, please.
I think what I would recommend is this option we call a buyback approach. For instance, if they sell AK-47, maybe 300,000 in the open market or in the black market, and you know people are disposed to selling them, then the government could offer more, maybe offer something like 400,000 if you return your weapon. That's one way. And once such weapons are returned, it is extremely important that they be destroyed. The more you have weapons around, the more the vulnerability and the temptation for the weapon to get on the streets. Thank you.
Okay, and Dennis, what quick fixes, what do we need to do to address this issue?
I think I would like to go to the root causes of why these things are proliferating and why we have conflicts. We have conflicts because the social contract that many governments have with the people is not being honored by those governments. So the best thing is to address these root causes: poverty, unemployment, because it is an unemployed graduate that will start thinking of using AK-47 and plan properly on how to rob a bank. You know, so it is very, very important that we address these root causes and then, of course, give good governance to the people, and I think we'll have a headway.
Gentlemen, I'd like to say a very big thank you for sharing your insights on this subject. Thank you, Dennis Makri and Adeoye Akinola.
Thank you very much.
Admittedly, the problem is incredibly complex, and policies to control and regulate these weapons will Admittedly, the problem is incredibly complex, and policies to control and regulate these weapons will not come easily. And nonetheless, the scale of death and injury caused by light weapons is such that the international community must continue to search for effective means of controlling and reducing the lethal commerce of small arms and light weapons around the world. Many thanks for watching Secure the Continent. Until next time, I'm Benga Aborowa. Thanks for watching.